Welcome to a shortened edition, in fact, a 50% edition of 580 Sports Talk on a Thursday afternoon. I'm Brendan Dworzinski. He is Dan Lucero, and we were here with you until just 4:30 today. That's right. We're off halfway through the show. You know why that is today?
Because Kansas State Wildcats are in the Sweet 16.
You're damn right. K-State Wildcats, for the first time since 2018, are in the Sweet 16. Do you remember who they beat that year to make it to the Elite Eight?
Yeah, they beat Kentucky.
They did beat Kentucky that year to make it to the Elite Eight. They will have to get through Tom Izzo and Michigan State this year if they want to advance on to the regional finals. We will talk all about that game coming up throughout this hour-and-a-half edition of the show, including our picks and breakdown coming up here in just a matter of moments. CJ Moore is also going to join us at the top of the 4 o'clock hour today. Usually during basketball season, CJ, as you know, joins us at 4:30, but because we're off at 4:30 and CJ has got plenty of work to do himself over in Kansas City covering the tournament, he will join us a little bit earlier at 4 o'clock coming up today. Well, it's Dr. Rick Peterson for our Invista Credit Union High School Whip Round. That's coming up at the bottom of this hour. Spring sports getting underway. Baseball, some soccer, some softball, all sorts of stuff starting up around the city. So we will get to that coming up later on this hour as well. Plus some either or, over under, and much more coming up on this shortened edition of 580 Sports Talk. We would love for you to be a part of the show. As always, hit us up on the text line, 785-272-9429, and the comment section on YouTube. Wide open to you throughout the course of the show today. Our channel is Sports on 580 WIBW. Go subscribe if you have not yet. We would love to hear your thoughts on today's K-State game. If you're a K-State fan, how worried are you? How confident are you? If you're a KU fan, how are you feeling about this game? Are you rooting for K-State because, yeah, they're likable? Maybe because you're just rooting for the Kansas school. Maybe you root for the conference.
Yeah, Big 12 solidarity.
Yeah. I would not fall into that category. Rooting for a conference, I think, is dumb. I don't like. I like the Big 12 because I like watching the teams that are in it, but I'm not gonna, show up to a game Rob Lowe style with Big 12 on my hat, right? Like, I don't like the conference like that. But
we call that the Scott Drew.
Yeah. Let's all celebrate each other and have a great day for the Big 12. Shut up, you weirdo. God. Anyway, sorry.
That was a lot.
Yeah.
That was a lot.
That came
from a place I didn't know we were going to explore today.
I hear the name Scott Drew, I go to a very dark place. I'm going to root for this K-State team. One, frankly, because it's good for business. Two, they're extremely likable. They're fun. We talked about that on the show yesterday. How can you not like Jerome Tang? How can you not like Marquise Noel, Keontae Johnson, all these guys? So we will, again, get to that, and we would love to get your thoughts on today's game, both on the text line and in the comment section on YouTube. Sports on 580 WIBW. All right, let's get to it. Coming up tonight, 5:30. That's tip-off time. K-State versus Michigan State. First game of the day. So you've got some pressure on you. All the eyeballs gravitating toward you. Everybody is watching you. It's the only game on to start off the start of the day. Now, granted, there is going to be some overlap as things go on. A couple questions that pop into my mind about this matchup. Number one, and this is the most X's and O's question of the bunch, what does Michigan State do, either offensively or defensively, that K-State is going to have to solve? Now, this is not an especially fast Michigan State team. They're not going to sprint up and down the floor on you. They're also not Virginia or North Texas in terms of not pushing the tempo at all. But what are the things that Michigan State does well that K-State, I don't want to say is going to have trouble with, but is going to have to figure out how to beat in this game? Or does it simply come down, possibly, and this might also be the answer, is it just stay within your own stuff, do your stuff, and that should be enough to win?
So the strengths, at least on the stat sheet for Michigan State, are their three-point shooting and their ability to rebound. They were the best three-point shooting team. I don't know if they were the best in the conference. They were top 10 in the country. Made nearly 39% of their threes this year. Now, they don't take a ton of them relative to the competition. It took over 600 threes, which is, it seems like a lot, but when you played 30-odd games and your opponents have taken well in excess of 700 threes, it maybe isn't so much. They're a little more choosy with their shots, but they got three guys who can really step back and stroke the three. And Tyson Walker, their primary ball handler, and Joey Hauser, their big man who creates a bit of a matchup problem for a lot of teams. Those guys are dead-eye shooters. You give them space, they're going to take 3 points. And the other thing, because they are a bigger team, is they rebound the ball really well. They were second in the Big Ten in defensive rebounding. They were third in the conference in rebounding margin. So they really get after the glass. And in that way, not too dissimilar to Kentucky. Michigan State doesn't have an Oscar Tshiebwe, a guy that's just going to get every rebound, and there's nothing you can do. He's too big and too strong and too good of a rebounder. Rebounding is a skill, and Oscar Tshiebwe is probably the best at it in the country. They don't have a guy like that, but team effort-wise, they have tended to rebound the ball really well, and that has obviously not been a strength for Kansas State throughout the season. So those are the two things that if Michigan State shoots the ball efficiently and expertly from behind the three-point arc and they dominate Kansas State on the glass, it could end up being a pretty long night and a pretty short trip to New York.
I think you can't just rely on, well, we have to worry about just ourselves, and if we do our stuff, we're going to win. I don't think you can really do that generally when you get to this round, when you get this far into the tournament. Now, maybe if you are, if you're Creighton and you're playing a Princeton team, that's probably a little bit different because you've got an obvious advantage in coaching and in talent and in size and all of that. But when you're going up against Tom Izzo's Michigan State, you're probably not going to end up in a situation where it's simply just, oh yeah, we'll just do our thing. No, they're going to do, that mantra in the Big 12 that you've got to make other teams play poorly, not just have you play well. I feel like Michigan State kind of fits that mold. And Tom Izzo as a coach, when you get to this time of year, his teams often fit that mold.
And I think Marquette would be the first to tell you that Michigan State made them play bad. In particular, they made Tyler Kolek play bad. And Tyler Kolek's one of the best point guards in the country, and he had one of, if not his worst games of the season in the round of 32. So whatever it was Michigan State did, and I don't have enough basketball film X and O's expertise to be able to pinpoint exactly what it was they did that frustrated Kolek. It may have been as simple as Kolek got 2 fouls pretty quick and maybe just never got into the rhythm of the game the way that sometimes you usually do. They're going to certainly try and do the same thing to Marquise Noel tonight and try and cut the head off of the snake, so to speak. If you make a team's point guard play poorly, the rest of the team is very much impacted. Ask the Kansas Jayhawks how well they played this year when DeJuan Harris played a poor game.
I mean, shoot, ask KU how things went after DeJuan Harris stepped on a photographer at the end of the first half on Saturday.
Yeah, so making another team's point guard play poorly. At the same time, Tyler Kolek, good player, but a young player, going up against 2 veteran guards in Tyson Walker and A.J. Hoggard. Marquise Noel is not going to back down, I think, for the challenge of those 2 guys, and he's certainly not going to have any back down in him playing at Madison Square Garden tonight.
That's the matchup specifically that I think, I don't know if I want to use the phrase that it gives me the most pause, but I am at a point personally where I feel like Marquise Noel needs to be great in some capacity for K-State to keep moving on. And that's not specific to Kansas State, by the way. I'm not trying to say, well, K-State's got nothing but bums and crappy coaching if Noel's not going off. That's not what I'm saying. I mean, look at Marquette. Marquette is a very good team. They, as much as I've got qualms with how Shaka does things, he had a great year coaching. He's a National Coach of the Year finalist. Michigan State took Tyler Kolek out, and that was a totally different Marquette team. And you ask, anybody else, ask Kansas. Jalen Wilson was shut down for about 17 minutes at the end of that game from the field. He only made a couple free throws at the end. He was shut down. When you shut down a team's best player in the NCAA tournament, it's going to be hard for them to win games. Right now, while I think if you're looking in a vacuum, who is the best player on K-State's team, I would probably still tell you it's Keontae Johnson when you combine every single factor. But Marquise Noel's ability to go nuclear, to make shots from literally anywhere on the floor in the half court, shoot, I wouldn't. You want to take a shot from the logo on the other side of half court? Go for it. It might go in. He's got as good of a chance at making one of those as anybody. He has, I think, the ability to, how do I want to phrase this? and I know I use the phrase the straw that stirs the drink a lot with a couple of different guys for KU and K-State over the course of the season, but he does that more for K-State, I think, more than anybody else does that's still remaining in the NCAA tournament. Maybe even a Brandon Miller at Alabama. Like, K-State, I think, needs Noel, even if he's not shooting it all that well. Let's say he goes 2 for 8 from 3 or something in this game today. He can still be great by getting downhill to the basket. I don't know if anybody is better at dropping off passes, going downhill to the basket, and getting assists on them than Markquis Nowell in all of college basketball this year. Getting downhill and either scoring at the rim, going to the free throw line where he is sensational, or getting the ball then to Keontae Johnson for the mid-range when everybody collapses on him, dumping it off to Gasson or Tomlin or kicking it out into the corner. I think he just needs to be not even at his best, but he needs to be great in this game in some capacity if K-State want to win. And I would imagine Tom Izzo feels the same way, and they're going to try to take him out. If I'm Tom Izzo, I would say the guy we need to stop is, if we have to focus, everyone gets 20% of the attention, but we need to spend 30% on Noel and, focus less on Desi Sills on the offensive end or whatever. I think it needs to be Noel, even more than Keontae Johnson, even more than Naquan Tomlin, because he's the head of the snake, essentially. He leads. Everything works through him, no matter what K-State is trying to accomplish.
He's why they're here. He's played brilliant basketball so far in the NCAA tournament, and he's got a really special opportunity to make some more memories in his hometown at the Mecca basketball, Madison Square Garden. And I don't think that's something that a kid like Noel is going to take lightly.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's something that he is going to, I don't think this is an opportunity he's going to let slip away from him to go out and show out, to play his best basketball, to elevate his teammates. Because that, in the end, that's what the great point guards do. You don't necessarily measure them by the raw points, assists, shooting percentage numbers. It's, do they elevate their teams? Do they elevate their teammates? And I think you saw his confidence in the way that he has played, the bravado that he has brought to the floor has elevated Kansas State over the first 2 games of their tournament. They will need that again in this game. The other thing Kansas State is going to need, and this is a commonality with all of their big wins against good teams, they're going to need somebody in the supporting cast to step up and play well. You know what you're going to get from Johnson and Noel, generally speaking. If those two don't play well, then you have a dispiriting flight back to MHK overnight, and that would be a drag. But that's what's going to happen if those two don't play well.
Mm-hmm.
But if those two do play well, you got to have somebody else go with them. And it's been Desi Sills, it's been Naquan Tomlin. I think it has to be one of those two guys. Tomlin in particular, I think is going to be really important defensively on Joey Hauser.
Mm-hmm.
It's the size and athleticism matchup that Kansas State needs. Any team needs to try and neutralize Hauser, who's a veteran guy and maybe a little bit more savvy. He certainly played a lot more basketball than Naquan Tomlin has, but Tomlin has the athletic ability and the size to minimize that matchup. That's a big matchup problem for a lot of teams. 6'9" and can shoot from the perimeter. Kansas State can match that. So Tomlin's got to stay on the floor and be able to match Hauser's minutes. And I don't necessarily think he has to match the production, but defensively, Tomlin's going to be really important. And then Desi Sills, attacking the basket. Sometimes Kansas State's offense can get a little bit stagnant, and Sills is the guy who can break down a defense, get to the rim, get fouled, try and dunk over every member of Michigan State's basketball program, both current and past. Somebody who can ignite a spark in that way that energizes the team and gives that offense a little bit of a lift. Not saying you need both of those guys to score 20, but you need both of them to be out there. You need both of them to be impactful in this matchup.
It'd be nice if they each scored 20.
Yeah, if they each scored 20, it's going to be a pretty fun night, I think, for Kansas State.
The other thing about Tomlin, too, and you brought this up earlier with how good Michigan State is at crashing the glass, you got to rebound in this game. I mean, it's very simple, and I know that you want to talk about savvy, there are probably a handful of reasons why Michigan State will still be able to box out, get rebounds from Tomlin, whatever, but use that size to your advantage. Be good on the glass. Neutralize as much as you possibly can something that Michigan State is better at you at, and that's obviously going to help your chances to win as well. You mentioned the word bravado when it came to Markquis Nowell a moment ago. Not asking this question specifically about him, but do you have any worries about the bright lights in this scenario? I don't think so, because I feel like this team is very locked in. I feel like they've got a coach who does a great job of making sure his players keep things in perspective. But considering this is the biggest game for most of these guys in their entire basketball careers, some of them, there's really no doubt about that. Almost all of them, there's no doubt about that. Do you feel like there's any reason to worry about being on this stage for the first time?
No, I really don't. There are guys, and we've all seen them, and we've all made the requisite comments and maybe jokes that aren't really jokes about players who just decide it's my time.
Mhm.
It's my chance to seize the spotlight and seize the moment, but that moment is too big for that player. And we've seen players like that all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think this moment is too big for Marquise Noel. And I don't think this moment is too big for Keontae Johnson. I think this is the moment that they've been playing for and preparing for. And I don't expect them to be cowed or diminished. Or on the flip side of it, I don't expect them to have to overcompensate on this stage. I think that they are prepared. I think that their coaching staff will have them prepared. And if anything, I think that the adrenaline, I think that the stakes, I think that the stage will provide a lift. I also think it works both ways. I think it provides a lift to Michigan State's players, particularly their own New York born and bred point guard, Tyson Walker, who has been written out of the narrative a little bit this week, at least as far as we can see. Probably
Right.
in Michigan, they're writing all the stories about Tyson Walker. And oh, yeah, the other team's point guard is from New York, too. But
it does feel like from a national perspective, the attention's on K-State.
yes.
Like, even though...
Because they're the upstarts. And Michigan
Yeah.
State has been here before. And this is not a common postseason destination for Kansas State in the way that it has been. Michigan State's been to the NCAA tournament 25 consecutive times.
Second most in the country.
And they've got 9 Final Fours under Tom Izzo. Like, we are no strangers to the Spartans on this stage at this time of year. Kansas State's a little more new. And especially with this coach and this program, this iteration of Kansas State basketball, this is brand new. So, yeah, I do think naturally that's going to be a story that I think people want to grab a hold of.
And I don't ask that question because I feel like they're at risk of something. Really, I think it comes down more to, are you worried about how they're going to start in this game? Because it's sort of the same principle as when we talk about how by the end of the year, freshmen aren't really freshmen anymore, right? Like, by the end of the first half, start of the second half, I mean, you're settled in. You're not worried about the crowd anymore. You're zoned into the game. But sometimes you do run into a situation where you were really hyped up for the game. The lights, wow, they really are much brighter when you get here. Dang, I'm playing in front of family. I'm playing in front of friends. I'm playing in my hometown, whatever it ends up being. Maybe you're a little bit tight to start the game. I think K-State has generally, over the course of the year, though, been pretty good at the start of games. I think they've done a great job, and Jerome Tang and staff have done a great job of making sure they are locked in for those moments. So I'm not entirely worried about it, but I do think it is at least fair to bring up, are you at all concerned about how this team is going to start, given that situation? Are there any other questions you have about what this matchup is going to look like, or anything else that you're going to be keeping an eye on specifically that may give K-State concern?
I just don't see Kansas State getting out toughed, and I don't see them being the team with less energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in a lot of the games that Kansas State has lost this year, that is why they have gotten beat. They've gotten out efforted a little bit. The energy level has been higher. The desperation level has been higher on the other sideline. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think we saw a very focused and very determined Kansas State team in the first 2 rounds of this tournament to win the games that they won to get here. And now I don't think this is a team, we talk about playing with house money when we talk about a team who's made the Sweet 16 and maybe surpassed preseason expectations by doing so. And you say, you know what, from here, it's house money. From here, whatever happens, you've already had a successful season.
Yeah.
That may well be true for Kansas State, and that's a discussion for another time. But who has no interest in having that conversation right now? The Kansas State Wildcats. Like, they think they belong here, and they think, like, why wouldn't they? Because they believed when nobody else did, they were going to go to the NCAA tournament. Why shouldn't they believe they can keep on winning? And I think they're going to take that attitude and that edge with them on the floor tonight at MSG.
I do think there is some empirical evidence out there that backs up that point about K-State having less energy. I mean, when they have less energy than their opponent, they struggle more and they have lost more games. You go back to their very first loss of the season. Do you remember that game?
Butler, yeah.
Played Butler. They lost that game 76-64.
And Butler stunk.
Yeah, Butler was not good this year. They were not good.
But Kansas State was just out of step, out of rhythm that entire night.
Yeah, and that one, I think, is probably the best example of it, that they just looked slow, looked like they were, they just weren't in the flow of things. That came right after their tournament win, that overtime game against LSU. Was it overtime?
Yeah.
Yeah, that crazy game against LSU, who also
Actually, you know
what?
what? It might have been overtime against Nevada, and then LSU was at regulation.
Okay. I think you're right about that. But then you look at the other losses from Big 12 play this year. TCU, 82-68. They lose that game. They had 25 turnovers or whatever it was in that game. Yeah, I would say that is lack of focus, lack of energy, especially when TCU is playing its best basketball of the year. You can say the same thing about the loss to KU at Allen Fieldhouse. I think you can certainly say that same thing about the loss to TCU in the Big 12 tournament as well, at least based on my perception of the game when I got to watch it. So I agree with you. I think K-State is going to be locked in for this game. I think that they are going to be just as, if not more, energetic than Michigan State. I do feel like against a team that has a little bit more of the been there before in them, though, and certainly a coach and a program and a program's infrastructure that really has been there before more often, I feel like you need to have those things swaying in your favor. I think this is going to be a great game. I do not know who to pick. We're 20 minutes plus into this segment. I do not know who I'm going to pick in this game. It is Michigan State that's favored by a point. I know a number of different outlets and advanced metrics sites have graded this game differently. I know KenPom has Kansas State as barely a favorite at all, but slightly favored. My guy Boyditology, he's got K-State slightly. Stats Perform, they've got Michigan State favored in this game. So you can look anywhere and find something to back up your belief in who's going to win tonight. Part of me wants to pick Michigan State. One, because the fact that they've been favored all week, even though K-State comes into this game with more momentum, makes me feel like something is up here. That sounds like we want people to bet on K-State, and the house has been incredibly dominant throughout the tournament.
That's a fact.
Like to a historic degree. And trust me, I'm well aware at this point. But by the same token, on a less analytical side of things, I have pretty much gotten every K-State pick wrong all year, basketball and football. Almost all of them. Save for when they went to Allen Fieldhouse. I was pretty sure KU was going to win that game. Football, for sure. I think I went the opposite of K-State every single week, and they ended up winning. So I'll just try to mush Michigan State here. So either you're going to win a little money with me, or K-State's going to win. So there you go. That'll be my justification.
Fair is fair. I think Kansas State is going to win. I thought Kansas State was going to win as soon as I knew they were going to play Michigan State. I think it's a matchup that is favorable for them in the sense that they will be able, I think, to get out and run against this team. And Michigan State's one of the slower playing teams in the country. Kansas State likes to go up tempo, and I expect there will be opportunities to do that. However, I think if the game does slow to a bit of a crawl, Kansas State, I think, showed down the stretch against Kentucky, they're comfortable playing that kind of game too. And I think that their focus level, I think that their energy level will be what it needs to be to pull this one across the line. Going to be a tight one throughout, maybe a little lower scoring than people expect. I'm going to say 70-66. K-State by 4. Noel makes a couple of free throws with like 3 seconds left to seal it.
So 70-66, that would be under the total, 138.5. I like the under too, for what it's worth. I like a low scoring game here. We'll talk more about this game coming up a little bit later on with CJ Moore. We'll talk some more basketball and either or over under coming up next. Rick Peterson will join us later on this hour. We've got plenty to get to in this shortened edition of 580 Sports Talk. Let us know your thoughts, your predictions for K-State, Michigan State coming up tonight on the text line, 785-272-9429, or in the comments on YouTube. Sports on 580 WIBW is the name of our channel. Go subscribe if you have not already. All right, Dan, my either or over-under is going to be of the over-under variety. So I know you're picking Kansas State over Michigan State. I'm going to set the number at 3.5. Over-under 3.5 higher seeds, or better seeds, win today's Sweet 16 games. So you've got 3-seed K-State. We already know you're picking them over 7-seed Michigan State.
Mm-hmm.
UConn is a 4 against number 8 Arkansas. Tennessee is a 4 against number 9 Florida Atlantic. And UCLA is a 2 against 3-seed Gonzaga.
So I like UConn and Tennessee tonight. If you're honestly on Tennessee, then I am on UConn. I think UConn matches up really, really well with Arkansas. Arkansas matched up really well with Kansas and won by a point, like one single point. They won a coin flip of a game.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they match up nearly as well against UConn. I think UConn's size is more impressive than Arkansas's size. I think that their athleticism is mitigated as well. And I think UConn, is as deep or maybe even deeper than Arkansas is.
Okay.
So I think UConn is going to win that game. Tennessee, they're older. They got, probably higher end talent than FAU, but FAU is probably a faster team. And if Tennessee doesn't get to play Aussie rules football style basketball like they did against Duke, and they get their bigs in some foul trouble, that could slow them down a little bit. So I like 3 of the high seeds. So what you're asking me is, do I like UCLA or Gonzaga tonight?
Effectively, yes.
And I picked Gonzaga before the games began. Mm-hmm. I thought that this would be the matchup, and I thought Gonzaga would win it. So I'll stay with that. But the fact that UCLA looks to be healthy-ish with both David Singleton and Dambona coming off of injuries and being able to play, it looks like in this game, that defensive edge could tilt UCLA's way. So I pick Gonzaga because I want to be consistent, but I don't pick them with a lot of certainty.
The thing that worries me about that Tennessee game, I'm also full bore in on Connecticut. The thing that worries me about Tennessee, even though they're a better team than Florida Atlantic, they are slower. That's certainly true. They've just gone through way too many stretches this year when their offense just sucks out loud, and they just cannot put the ball in the basket. 56 points at home in a loss to Kentucky. 54 in a road loss to a very mediocre Florida team. 54 a second time against Kentucky as well. They won a game with 46 points scored this year. Like, they have so many stretches. Just think, this is gross. This is hard to watch. It's just stuck in the mud. It would make Bruce Weber's offenses look crisp. They have way too many stretches of that. I still think they are better than Florida Atlantic, and I think they'll get it done. I think they are going to get bounced the next round. I think Michigan State, K-State's winner is going to make it to the Final Four. I would take either of those two teams over Tennessee. I'm going to go with an over on this number, by the way. Over 3.5. I think it's, all the numbers say UCLA should win. I feel like Gonzaga should, and that's how the house keeps winning. So I'll bet UCLA there.
Fair enough. Joseph Yesufu announced today that he would be entering the transfer portal. That is the 4th Kansas Jayhawk to announce as such, after the announcements yesterday of Zach Clemens and Bobby Pettiford and the prior announcement of Cam Martin. So my over-under, 4.5 Kansas Jayhawks in the transfer portal.
Over. I'm very confident in that. In fact, you could have given me 5.5 and I would go over.
Okay.
I don't really know why Kyle Cuff came to Kansas in the first place, to be honest with you. I know there was a connection there with Self and his dad. So I understand that, but that was never going to work out. I always assumed he was going to transfer out at some point. Now he hasn't played in 2 years.
Right.
Like, he played 15 minutes or something this year. So he's going to leave. I'm not a report, but I'm expecting it. And I think MJ Rice is leaving too. I would be very surprised if Rice sticks around. Sometimes it just happens. Like, you just have a lost year because you're not a great fit or because you're injured or whatever. Now, Rice did not have nearly the impact this year, or even close to it, that Quentin Grimes had, remember, in 2018, 2019. And Grimes, you could tell, has talent. I mean, he's a very solid NBA player now, but it just doesn't work. And sometimes you just have a lost year and you say, well, this sucks, let's move on. I think that's going to be the case with MJ Rice. Just, hey, you know what? We wanted it to work. You've got talent. He'll go to another Power 5 school. I do believe that. I think he'll be in another high major conference, probably the ACC, if I had to guess. And, just best of luck to you. I think it just doesn't work out. So, yeah, I would take a very firm over. I think it'll be 6, which would tie, by the way, the number of guys who transferred out, or maybe even be one more after the 21 season when they got bounced by USC, which was very similar. Like, a lot of guys who just weren't fits. Like, Latrell Giselle, glad you are having success at Stephen F. Austin. That was just a waste of a roster spot. Jethro Muskinen, obviously, may he rest in peace, but just never a fit with KU at the time. And I think this year is going to look very similar.
Yeah, and roster turnover served that KU transition from the 21 to 22 seasons pretty well, and maybe it will do so again.
Trust me, I sure hope so. We've got to get to a break. Rick Peterson will join us next for the Invista Credit Union High School Whip Around on 580 Sports Talk. Rick Peterson covers all things prep sports and Washburn University for TopSports.news. That's where you can find all of his fantastic work. You can also find him on Twitter at Peterson_Rick. And he joins us every Thursday at the bottom of the 3 o'clock hour for our Invista Credit Union High School Whip Around. Pistol, how's it going, my friend? How are you?
It's been a tough week, Brendan. I mean, I'm still waiting on spring. I was supposed to be in spring sports, but I haven't had a spring day yet. And I've frozen this will be 4 straight days. So I'm not in the best of moods.
Well, just think about how great it's going to feel when we finally do get like a 75-degree day. It's going to be the best day of your year.
That will be awesome.
Well, we've got plenty in terms of spring sports previews to get to today. We have moved on past the winter sports. State tournaments for basketball are over. We are moving on to the spring sports. And Pistol, let's get to some of the teams and some of the athletes we need to be watching in the city coming up this year. And We'll start with the sport that's right on the front page right now of topsports.news. Let's go to track and field for the girls' side of things first. You've got your list of girls' track athletes to watch up on the website right now. A few names on the top of the list that we are certainly familiar with: Madeline Carter, Bethany Drews, Peyton Fink, all of whom have been standouts for including the cross-country season this year and obviously past years in track. But who are some of the other names we should be focusing on this year?
Well, there's those that you mentioned are very, very good athletes. Drews and Carter are heading to Kansas. But you got some other, you got some others that I think are going to be a little more surprises this year. You didn't mention Taylon Stahlbomber, I don't think, and she's a really good state class hurdler.
Yeah.
Her sister's a good hurdler, Jada. You got some good throwers. Reagan Peterson's one of those. She was a state placer last year. Topeka's a track town, and I think I always have some people I'm covering that have a chance to be really, really good. Lenny Naroge is another one you got to throw up there. He's also going to KU. But we may not have the dominance that we did last year with the Tanner Newkirk, but I fully expect to have some state champions. Shawnee Heights girls have very, very good sprinters, and they were really good last year. So I think I'm going to have a lot of kids that have a chance to win gold in late May.
In terms of team performance, and we'll start with the girls' side first, which teams do you think are the deepest, or if you're going to, rank them 1 through, what do we have, 10 in the county? How would you, kind of order that, and who would you put at the very top in terms of best girls teams going into this spring?
Well, Shawnee Heights is going to be really good quality-wise. Washburn Rural is always really good depth-wise. They have some talent at the top, but they probably got 100 kids out for track right now.
Wow.
So if they in a meet like the city meet, they're just gonna, and even in the Centennial League, they're gonna nickel and dime you to death. So I think that would be the team that's probably the most deepest. I think Siemens got really good quality. Shawnee Heights has really good quality, but hey, you got to go with the numbers and for depth, and I think that Rural has that.
No, that's a phenomenal point about having that depth. And I'll ask you the same question then, Pistol, on the boys' side as well. Obviously, some standouts who are returning. Hopefully, some health for Jeremiah Smith this year. I know his season obviously ended with a very unfortunate injury situation last year. You mentioned Lenny Jaroge from Topeka West, who's back for another year before he heads off to KU. What about the boys' side? What are the teams that are really piquing your interest here early in the season?
Well, again, Washburn Rural will be very deep. They got some good numbers. I don't think on the boys' side we have quite as many like guys you can just pencil in as state contenders this year. We did last year, starting with Newkirk, but Lenny's going to be very good. Jeremiah's all he's got to do is stay healthy, and he'll be a 3-event state champ. He'll win the hurdles, and he'll win the 100 and the 200. He's the fastest 100 meters guy in the history of Kansas. All he has to do is stay healthy. He stayed healthy 2 years ago as a sophomore, and that's what he did, was win 3 titles. So, but Heights also has very good distance runners, Jackson Esquibel and Corey Sutton. So those are good place to start. And then I think we're going to have more surprises on the boys, because I think there's going to have some guys that we haven't seen that come out of the woodwork.
We're talking to Rick Peterson from TopSports.news. It's the Invista Credit Union High School whip around here on 580 Sports Talk. Go check out all of Pistol's work at TopSports.news. Just a side note here, Pistol. I love hearing you talk about track, man. You can tell your passion for the sport comes through so much. I love hearing you preview these track athletes, because it's just very obvious and very clear how much you care about this sport.
And that is true. And I've always liked track, and I'm sure I've told you this. I just like track. But one of the main reasons that I like track, I'm going to a track meet later today. I always figure I got 36 chances for a good story. 18 boys events, 18 girls events. How do you beat that?
You can't.
I'm ready to go. Yeah.
No, that is absolutely awesome. And of course, we'll be talking about it throughout the season. Excuse me, a little tongue-tied here. Let's move on to some of the other sports for the spring, and we'll try to get through as many here as we can. Let's go to the boys' side. Let's go to baseball here. We'll start with the Diamond Sports. And I know there's a story right now over at topsports.news about a pretty darn impressive comeback by the Shawnee Heights boys to top Bishop Miege the other day, 7-6. They're down 6-1 and 4-0 at one point. Came back to win that game. Obviously, Shawnee Heights is going to be one of the better teams in the city, as they always are. Give us a little bit of a preview, though, for some of the headlines that you'll be keeping an eye on throughout the season on the baseball side of things in the city.
Well, Seaman's going to be very good again, I think, starting with Braden Botter, who's probably one of the best pitchers in the state. And I think Seaman's going to have a chip on their shoulder. They lost a heartbreaker at state last year in a game that they had in hand. And I think they're going to use that to their motivation and use that to their benefit coming in. Like you mentioned, Shawnee Heights, that was an impressive performance yesterday. They had a kid come in that I had never seen pitch, and he pitched 6 innings of strong relief and got the win. And Ulrich, who I don't know much about, he's a junior. He came in and had two-run doubles and 5 art ribbies overall. And so they just they're going to be very good again. Them and Seaman were state tournament teams last year. Washburn Rural is going to be very, very, very good. I think they have a chance to win 6A.
Wow.
They were third in 6A last year. They return a ton of experience off that team. Jay Maston does a great job with that team. And there's 3 for you right off the bat, and I'll throw in Rossville from the county. Rossville, I think, went 19-2 last year, and they've got things rolling. So it's going to be an interesting baseball season. I think we'll have plenty of teams challenging for state championships.
How would you assess the depth of the Centennial League? Because we're obviously the most familiar with that, and with the league realignment, things are so different. But from what you know, Pistol, Centennial League, United Kansas Conference, how deep do you think those leagues are right now in terms of baseball?
Well,
it's kind of hard to know.
I don't know if I can answer that question, Brendan, just because of the change in league. If I haven't done it, I will do it. I'll call somebody by the wrong league just because I'm still getting used to that. I mean, they're just, and Shawnee and UKC does things a little differently. They don't play double hitters usually. They play single games. It's just a whole bunch of differences to get used to this year. I do know the Centennial League is still pretty deep, starting right with Manhattan, which is always good, and Washburn Rural, which is very good. So those are 2 at the top. And then you go over to the UKC, and you right off the bat, you got Seaman and Shawnee Heights. So there's still good teams in both of those leagues anyway. I don't know anything about Highland Park's league, and we'll have to see on that. But I do know the UKC and Centennial League have good talent.
Let's move on to the girls' side of the Diamond Sports, Pistol. Let's go to softball. And I mean, we know at this point, I think we are all well versed in just how good softball is in the city of Topeka. But it is going to look a little bit different this year, with some players moving on to the college ranks, some playing their final season of softball before they move on to college. Obviously, Washburn Rural has been a dominant program for a long time. Topeka High has been absolutely phenomenal for the last couple of years. What do you make of the top of the city and those 2 teams in particular, and the way their softball outlook looks for this year?
Well, and I don't know if you know, but right off the bat, Topeka High plays Washburn Rural in softball tomorrow. So we'll know quite a bit more after tomorrow. I mean, that's a game I'm really excited. I think it's a doubleheader. I'm really excited about, and those are 2 very, very good teams again. Obviously, Topeka High graduated Nigel Kennedy, who's making her name already at Stanford. Washburn Rural graduated Campbell Bagshaw, which is a very key player, but they have back Emerson Cope, who's a Nebraska signee. But it's going to be a good test right off the bat for both those teams. And then I think Seaman's very good too. That Seaman has a lot coming back from their team that made it to 5A state.
Topeka High, how much of a step back? And I know, there's more players than just Nyjah, who is having a tremendous year. I was just looking for her stats right now. She's been incredible to start her career at Stanford. I mean, the numbers she's putting up are outrageous. She already has a no-hitter included. Obviously, they've still got some other really good players around. Addison Carroll's one who jumps off the page. She's headed to Illinois next year to play her softball career. How much of a step back, if there's one, do you think they're going to have after 2 straight years, the best 2 years they've had in program history?
Well, let's call it growing pains. I think they're definitely going to have some growing pains. They had 2 freshman pitchers last year that I think are going to have to step up, and I think they will. And I think, like I said, I wasn't kidding. I think we'll know a lot more after tomorrow, because right off the bat you're playing. It's a rematch of the last year's championship game, so you're right off the bat you're going to get a very, very good test. But I think High's still going to be very good. Pitching is obviously the question mark because of losing Kennedy. But I think both of those teams we just mentioned, High and Rural, are going to be right back close to the same situation they were in last year.
One final question for Rick Peterson from TopSports.news here on the Invista Credit Union High School Whip Around. Pistol, let's get to girls soccer here. We'll get to one more sport before we let you go for today. Again, we'll probably have some of the similar teams, Washburn Rural among others, at the top of the city in terms of the expectations for this year. But what are the headlines that we should be paying attention to on the girls soccer pitch?
Well, you start with Washburn Rural.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're a contender every single year. They were second in the state last year. I saw them the other night. They're very good. They got some athletes that from other sports that are going to help them. Brooklyn DeLay, Addie Brocksterman, on and on and on. Kate Hank. So Brian Hensel's one of the absolute best coaches in the state. So there's where you start. I was surprised that Shawnee Heights took it on the chin the other night, but they're traditionally a very good team. Hayden's a good team. And I think there's some others I think we just got to wait and see. Topeka High, I saw them the other night. They had a 9-0 win. So we'll see. But you always start. That's where you start is Washburn Rural.
Rick Peterson covers high school sports in the city and county better than absolutely anybody. You can find his work and the rest of his great crew's work over at topsports.news. And you can find him on Twitter at Peterson_Rick. He joins us every single Thursday for the Invista Credit Union High School Whip Around. Pistol, awesome stuff as always. We appreciate it. Try to stay warm, and we will talk to you next Thursday.
Thanks, Brendan. Bye-bye.
That is Rick Peterson from topsports.news. Absolutely fantastic stuff. All the headlines you need to know for the start of the spring sports season here over the last couple of weeks. Already some great starts for some city teams. We have to get to a break for the national and local news. We'll talk to CJ Moore to lead off the final half hour on this pre-Sweet 16 edition of 580 Sports Talk. Hey, now it's the final 4 o'clock. Well, it is the 4 o'clock hour. Man, I'm just off my game.
You want to try
today.
again?
Yeah. Hey, now 4 o'clock hour of 580 Sports Talk coming your way. Brendan Dworzinski, Dan Lucero here with you. Jeez, what a day. Apparently I needed a short day today. Goodness gracious.
Yeah, we only get 90 minutes of this. We can't get it right.
No, my goodness. We're off at 4:30 because Kansas State basketball is on our airwaves today on the K-State Sports Radio Network. Sweet 16 action against Michigan State. I'm excited, man. This is going to be such a great game. We're going to talk to CJ Moore about this contest coming up in just a minute. By the way, don't forget, we're still taking your predictions, your thoughts on the game on our text line, 785-272-9429. And you can also hit us up in the comment section on YouTube. Sports on 580 WIBW is the name of our channel. We'll get you a final word coming up a little bit later on this hour as well. But right now, it is time for our Big 12 basketball breakdown, brought to you by the 23rd Street Brewery in Lawrence. Earlier today, because our normal time to talk to CJ Moore at 4:30, well, we'll be off, and it'll be K-State pregame time. So we welcome in CJ Moore on his way to Kansas City for some coverage of the Midwest Regional of the NCAA tournament. CJ, first thing I've got for you today, just looking back on that first weekend of the tournament, did it feel like it was the appropriate amount of madness for how this tournament was billed leading up to the start of it last Thursday night? That would have been.
Yeah, I think it was a pretty good first weekend. We had some good games. We got a few quote unquote Cinderellas in the Sweet 16, but honestly, like, the second weekend is probably my favorite weekend because the matchups get better, the games I think are more high level. So like everybody loves the first weekend, and I do too. But it's almost like too much. It's almost like there are too many games going on at one time. I like to be able to watch every single game. And so that's why I like the second weekend, where like you'll have some overlap tonight, but at least there's just 2 games on at a time, and I can really lock in on those games. So I'm a big second weekend guy.
No, I can completely understand that. Well, let's jump right in then to the action coming up this weekend. Sweet 16 and Elite 8 over the next 4 days, starting tonight. And let's start with Kansas State and the way they have advanced on from, they were picked, as we have been talked about so much over the course of the season. They're picked last in the Big 12 to start the year. They then earn a 3 seed in the tournament, and they pick up a really impressive win over Kentucky. And real quick, before we look ahead to Michigan State, what stood out to you the most about the way K-State performed against Kentucky and what they were able to do to pick up that win in a game where they were favored, but a lot of people thought Kentucky was a tough matchup?
I thought that Marquise Noel was able to take advantage of, Kentucky has struggled with this ball screen coverage all year. And obviously they could not guard Marquise Noel. And I think the best sign for K-State right now is the fact that, in early conference season, he was on fire and really playing better than anybody in college basketball. And K-State at that time was playing fantastic. And you've got a scenario again now where he is kind of on fire. Hopefully the break did not cool him off. But if he stays hot, I think K-State's going to have a really, really good chance to win this game. And, he needs to be able to get his feet into the paint. I think that him and Desmond Sills is a big game for those two. I think that's something that I thought Marquette settled maybe a little bit too much for some perimeter shots. K-State needs to get to the basket.
We're chatting with CJ Moore of The Athletic. It's our Big 12 basketball breakdown here on 580 Sports Talk, brought to you by the 23rd Street Brewery. Go follow CJ on Twitter at CJ Moore Hoops, and of course, check out all of his great work covering college basketball over at theathletic.com. Do you think, CJ, that K-State needs Noel to make a ton of shots to be able to win? We hear Bill Self talk about it all the time, right? Find ways to win without making shots. Do you think K-State's path to a Final Four includes Noel being a 40 to 50% three-point shooter these next couple of games?
Well, that certainly helps. But, I don't think it's like do or die. He has to make shots for them to win. I think that, I think the big thing about this game against Michigan State is, like, Michigan State in the past has played really fast. They want to get the ball out of the basket and go. I know Jerome Tang, I think, talked about it in his press conference yesterday. But this is a Michigan State team that plays slower, would probably prefer the game played in the half court. And, I think K-State would prefer another game. So I think if the game's played at K-State's pace, like up and down, I think that's more advantageous for the Cats. But yeah, I do think that Michigan State's going to try its best to take away the paint. In case it's going to have to make the since Marquise Noel is one of the best shooters, then yeah, he's going to probably important that he's able to knock that couple threes.
I remember asking you this, it must have been 6 or more weeks ago now. K-State went through a stretch where they weren't turning the ball over quite as much. We know how big of a problem that was early in the season. And I said, hey, do you think this problem is fixed? You said, well, I think it's more of a short-term thing than actually fixing the problem. Well, they've been much better about taking care of the ball, and I believe they only had, 8 turnovers against Kentucky. Now that we are at the most important part of the year, does it feel like K-State has maybe fixed its biggest offensive bugaboo with that ball control problem?
It's definitely been better. Like you said, the numbers have been better lately, and it's important. Like I was looking through just some kind of trends, like what's still playing now. Like who are the teams that are still playing? Why are they still playing? And honestly, like if you look at these teams' statistical footprints across the board, all of them are good at, in some way or another, getting more shots than their opponent. Like, obviously it helps to shoot the ball well, yada, yada, yada. But, like, across the board, it's either they're really good at offensive rebounding, they're really good at creating turnovers. In some form or fashion or way, all of these teams that are left are good at creating more shots for themselves than their opponent. And one way to do that is to limit turnovers. And so that's why it's important for K-State. I think, Marquise has probably played maybe a little bit more under control lately. And, that helps. And the one advantage I think K-State has right now is for him in particular, like not facing Big 12 defenses. That's kind of fun, and facing off against other teams. So, I will say Kentucky had a real problem guarding ball screens this year. K-State was able to figure that out. I don't think Michigan State quite has a problem to that level. So K-State's going to have to figure out a way to, how can it expose Michigan State's defense, which has been pretty good here of late. But again, it hasn't played. It played a really, really good team in Marquette, but USC, whatever. So I think it's a game K-State can definitely win.
We're chatting with CJ Moore. It is our Big 12 breakdown here on 580 Sports Talk. You can find CJ's work over at The Athletic. Make sure you're subscribed if you have not already, and you can find him on Twitter as well at CJ Moore Hoops. And the Big 12 breakdown is brought to you by 23rd Street Brewery. CJ, before we let you go, I wanted to ask you about a few other games in the Sweet 16 and potential Elite 8 matchups. On the other side of K-State's bracket, Florida Atlantic versus Tennessee, and FAU, best season in program history, and yet they got booed constantly when they played FDU, understandably, this past weekend. Is Tennessee a clear favorite to win that game? And is there anything FAU can do to try to upset Rick Barnes' Tennessee team?
I don't think they're a huge favorite. I think that, people look, okay, team coming out of Conference USA, but I'd encourage you to go look at what's happening in NIT right now. You've got North Texas and UAB. I believe UAB is
I
live as well.
Yeah.
So that league was pretty good this year. And, Memphis was a team that was hot late and beat Houston in the American tournament. And I honestly had Memphis in my Elite Eight. Like, I thought that was a team that had a chance to go on a run. And, Florida Atlantic wins that game. And I've studied them a lot on tape because I did a story on Dusty May this year, just a few weeks ago. And I really like their talent. Like, I think they've got high major level dudes. And, Tennessee's defense is something that is really, really hard to go up against. It's the best defense in the country. But I will say, the one team that maybe will have prepared Florida Atlantic for this game is North Texas, another really, really good defensive team, another physical team. So, Tennessee's physicality is on another level. And maybe it overwhelms them, but I think Dusty May will have it ready, and I think they got a shot.
Across the bracket over in the West Regional, the game that I am most excited for, I think, at least in the Sweet 16 round, Gonzaga versus UCLA. It's been 17 years since that iconic 2006 matchup between those two teams. They used, of course, the Adam Morrison at the end crying game. That was a legendary contest. The last time these two teams played, it was a great game in the 2021 tournament. What are you expecting out of this Gonzaga-UCLA matchup?
I think it's going to be a great game. I think it's the best game in the Sweet 16. I'm right there with you. I think the biggest weakness for Gonzaga in the non-conference, and something to watch tonight, was its guard play was not the best. in non-conference play, and it was able to get healthy against WCC teams. But UCLA's got high-level guards. Tiger Campbell will be a test for them. So that's something to watch. Shemi's been really, really good in this tournament. He's been great in March, for a few years now. So UCLA's young up front. We'll see how they can handle Timmy. But I think it's going to be a fun, high-level game.
So we know that is your favorite game of the Sweet 16 slate. Any others really jumping off the page to you about interesting matchups, or just think they'll be fun basketball? I think Xavier, Texas has an opportunity to be a phenomenal game. Alabama, San Diego State might be a fun clash of styles. Any other games really jump out to you that you're going to make sure you've got that full attention on?
Well, I'm going to be in Kansas City, so I'll have my full attention on those games, and I think those matchups will both be really good. I think any of those 4 teams good enough to make a Final Four. I think any of the 4 teams in Vegas are probably good enough to make a Final Four. Those are the 2 regions that I would say I think the games, have a chance to be really, really good.
Last thing I've got for you, CJ, then we'll let you go, and we appreciate the time on a very busy Thursday afternoon. Just one final thought on KU from this past weekend. Do you think that KU wins that game against Arkansas if it has Bill Self at the end of the game?
Yes.
I mean,
if it has them for the entire game, then I think Norm did a fine job. I think the one area where I would say I think Norm messed up tactically was I thought he fouled out KJ Adams and Ernest Uday by not playing them. Like I think he sat those 2 guys for too long. They both end up with 4 fouls. I would have looked at it as, okay, I've got one guy with 3 fouls. What do I do? I would play him. So you had 2 fouls left with those 2 guys. I thought he should have played them 1 minute in the second half. And maybe it's not a 1-possession game at the end if that's the case. So that's the one spot where I think he messed up. And then, obviously you want one of the best X's and O's, one of the best tacticians, one of the best adjusters in the game on your sideline. And, probably could have been worth a couple points. But I didn't think Norm I thought he did a fine job. I just think, obviously, Bill Self's one of the best coaches in the country for a reason.
Yeah, exactly. Not his fault that he's not Bill Self, but I just need a little closure, so I appreciate that, CJ. CJ Moore from The Athletic. He covers all things college basketball. Go find his work at The Athletic. Please subscribe if you have not already. He'll be covering all the action from the Kansas City Regional coming up this weekend, and he joins us for the Big 12 basketball breakdown here on 580 Sports Talk. CJ, thank you so much for taking a few minutes for us. We really appreciate it. Enjoy all the games this weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, man. See you.
That is CJ Moore from The Athletic joining us for an earlier edition of the Big 12 Breakdown, brought to you by the 23rd Street Brewery in Lawrence at the corner of 23rd Street and Castle. I should have asked him about Joseph Yesufu. I got to sit next to CJ for a lot of games during Big 12 play this year at Allen Fieldhouse. Our seats were next to each other. And if you've ever read CJ's work, and I hope you have at this point, I hope you are an Athletic subscriber because he does a tremendous job. With people who know X's and O's, watching games with them is so fun because, like, I like basketball. I think I know basketball pretty well, but I have a hard time when I'm watching the game live knowing exactly what a play call is or exactly maybe what the defensive strategy is. Like, I'll have to rewatch a play to know exactly what is going on. Mm-hmm. With guys who really know X's and O's and study this stuff, like he'll call stuff out before it happens, and it's awesome. But I don't think CJ was always the biggest fan of Joe Yesufu. Don't think, just based on, not to publicize private conversations, but I don't think he was a huge fan of Joe's game or the fact that he took the worst 3-pointers of all time. Just thought.
We talked earlier about players sometimes who try and seize the spotlight and do things perhaps they should not do. Joseph Yesufu is one of the examples of that, of a guy who would maybe get a little too froggy when the opportunity presented itself for like a big moment or in a big game, would maybe tell himself, hey, this is Joseph Yesufu's time to shine.
Well, the interesting part about that, when he was at his best at Drake, because he was a 6-man at Drake too, until there were injuries in front of him. Then he started at the point, and that's when he took off. I think if I had to guess, I think he needs to go back to a place where they can play a little bit more freely when he knows he's not coming off the court. You can say, Joe, go do something, because he's crazy fast.
Yeah.
And he can jump. He's got surprising hops for a dude who's just 6 foot.
And he's a confident shooter.
Yes. which is valuable.
And like in warmups, he never misses.
Mhm.
Like you and I were courtside watching him warm up in Des Moines.
It was crazy.
I think he made like 19 out of 20 3-pointers during one stretch. It was remarkable. I was like I was watching Steph Curry.
Yeah, he was right on top of us. I mean, we were right there sitting courtside during the open practice.
Below the break threes, corner and wing threes, just
Couldn't
over
miss.
and over again, just bottoms.
No, I wish the best for him and all the other dudes who are transferring, but I think it's clear just not a lot of great fits. Real quick, because we do have to get to a timeout here. Games coming up tonight, Sweet 16. Let's get some picks. We already know I'm going to take Michigan State. You're taking K-State. I hope I'm wrong about that for what it's worth. The other game on K-State's quadrant of the bracket, Tennessee versus Florida Atlantic. Tennessee, depending on where you look, favored by 5 or 5.5. Our friends at FanDuel earlier had them at 4.5, and I took that spread. I like Tennessee to win this game, even though I do worry about their offense going ice age cold.
Yeah, that's the thing. They may not be able to outscore Florida Atlantic if Florida Atlantic can get out and run. If Tennessee can be physical with FAU and slow them down, that's going to be the kind of game like they were physical with Duke. If they're able to be that physical with Florida Atlantic, I think they'll probably lock them up and have a little bit too much talent and size for the Owls to handle.
Yeah, I think the size is going to be difficult. Like CJ is right. Conference USA actually had a pretty darn good year for a league that has not been good at basketball since Louisville left years ago. They don't have dudes like the SEC has dudes, though.
No.
The other games coming up, they are in the West Regional tonight. Arkansas versus UConn. We're both on UConn. That spread actually moved a little more toward Arkansas over the last couple of days. It was, I think
it was 4.5.
Yeah, it was 4.5. Now it's 3.5 today.
Yeah. I
like UConn, man.
Yeah, I do too. I think that they are better at the stuff that Arkansas is really good at, like athleticism, size, depth, all those things that Arkansas is really good at, like scoring inside the paint, the scoring inside the 3-point arc. UConn's better at all that stuff, and they are better from behind the arc than Arkansas is, and I think that might be the difference.
My system says UConn should be a 7-point favorite in this game for whatever that's worth. Take that for whatever value you deem is worthy of that. The final game. Have you come up with a pick yet for UCLA Gonzaga?
I'm taking Gonzaga, but only because I did at first. Only because I did when the bracket came out. I think that, maybe a little bit more experience in the front court with Timmy and Strother is going to be valuable, but big experience in the backcourt edge for UCLA.
Yeah.
We talk all the time how important experience in the backcourt is, and that might be where UCLA, seizes control of this game. But still, I'm going to ride with Gonzaga. I'm going to ride with Drew Timme. I'll take the team with the best player, and I think that's Timme.
Man, everything in my head tells me pick Gonzaga, but my picks have been so bad that I think I'm going to go with the books and I'll go UCLA. That's going to be an awesome game, man. I cannot wait for that. By the way, real quick before the commercial break, we've got 3 minutes left in the poll. I am currently at 55.6% for our Sweet 16 player draft from yesterday.
Looks like you're going to edge me out, but it was close.
Very close. Very close. We've got to get to one final break. We'll come back, get you a final word before we send you off to the K-State Sports Network here on 580 WIBW. Wrapping up a very short edition of 580 Sports Talk with the final word before we send you off to K-State coverage for the Sweet 16. Dan, you're first.
Michigan State is in the Sweet 16 because they matched up well with Marquette. They were a veteran team that could bully a much younger and less physical Marquette squad. They are not going to be able to do that to Kansas State tonight. I think the Wildcats are more than ready to meet the physicality, meet the aggression, meet the energy of Tom Izzo's Spartan squad. And I think Marquise Noel is going to make himself a memory at Madison Square Garden tonight. Give me the Cats!
Depth is important. Your secondary contributors, that's what I would consider Desi Sills, Naquan Tomlin. Those guys all very important when you get into these big games. But in this matchup against a coach who has been there as many times as anyone who is coaching right now, against a team that's got veteran experience, you want to rely on your superstars, your primary bucket getters and playmakers, Marquise Noel and Keontae Johnson. K-State, rely on those guys tonight. You need help from the others, but follow those guys, ride those guys as far as you can go. And honestly, it's worked most of the year. Why can't it work again as K-State tries to get back to the Elite Eight for the first time since 2018? We will be back tomorrow from 3 until 5:30, recapping this game, hopefully previewing K-State in the Elite Eight. We'll talk about the rest of the Sweet 16. Matt Derrick will join us and much more. That is coming up tomorrow on 580 Sports Talk from 3 until 5:30. Until then, for Dan Lucero, I'm Brendan Dworzinski. Thanks for listening. K-State Radio Network coverage is up next.